He bought an option that expired in 15 minutes and it needed to go up 10% for him to make money. That doesn't happen.
Today's guest is Davis, CEO of Ask Clio, a fintech building AI co-pilots for brokerages to cut support costs, reduce churn, and lift the client experience. He helped scale InstaNet through the electronic trading era and sold his startup Gatsby to eToro. Let's get into it. What are some of the biggest challenges that brokerages face today when it comes to client support?
The most important thing you do are the people you hire. I mean, I'd much rather have the second tier product than the first tier team. The only thing that hasn't changed is that changed. In businesses like this, you've got to be ready to make that pivot. So with Ask Clio, we look at three different buckets. Number one, clients want to learn about investing, or the second bucket is my firm. And bucket three, which is where we have a unique aspect, we think, is my accounts. How many dividends did I earn this year? People blew money because they didn't know what they didn't know. And you want to give them tools so they don't blow their money.
Welcome to our show, Lead to Scale. This podcast is sponsored by Algo AI Partners. We help fintech services companies and businesses scale using smart AI solutions. If you want to book a free consultation to find out more, click the link in the description below. Today, I am joined by Davis Gaynes, CEO of Ask Clio, a fintech building AI co-pilots for brokerages to slash support costs, reduce churn, and elevate the client experience. Davis has helped scale InstaNet through the electronic trading era, sold a startup to eToro, and is now bringing the operator DNA to an AI-driven customer support. Welcome, Davis. I appreciate you on the show. Naturally, I can't do you justice to introduce, so please, kindly introduce yourself.
Thanks very much for having me. It's great to be here. I love talking about this stuff. I've been in fintech for a long time. I was fortunate enough to come right out of school and go to this firm, InstaNet. InstaNet had been losing money for 15 years straight when I got there. It was a classic startup. That was a great idea. Everybody said, oh yeah, electronic trading, that's going to happen on Wall Street. But Wall Street wasn't ready. And when I got there, I was lucky in that it was just getting ready. Computers were starting to hit the street. Small cap trading was starting to hit, and that was an important part of what we sold in terms of lowering transaction costs. So I spent 17 years at InstaNet, from 50 people to 1,000, a couple of million in revenue to $1 billion, and had the amazing experience any business person would wish for, getting being part of a team that builds something like that. Started out as a salesman, was involved in running sales and marketing, and reported to the CEO as one of the C team leaders for the last 10 of that 17 years. So just an amazing experience. I had two little kids at the time I left, and I consulted for the next 10 years so I could be around for them. And that was another great experience. I got to work with a lot of people I knew from growing up at InstaNet, friends of friends who had various issues with sales and marketing and technology as they grew their firms, mostly fintech and brokerage. And then I got into the startup world. Gatsby was my third startup, my first success. That was an options trading firm that we sold to eToro after about 5 years. That was a great experience in that I was clueless about anything modern retail brokerage. I had never done that. And one of my partners at a previous startup told me about Robinhood, what they had done introducing equity trading and knowledge about equities and investing to a young population. And I was not familiar with it. He said, hey, we could do the same thing with options, because all those equity traders, they know what options are, they're interested in them, but it's a big step up and they don't know what to do or how to do it. So we built a beginner option trading app. eToro, who's a very successful firm, kind of like Robinhood is in America, overseas, they were looking to build a presence in America, and we were a nice fit for them. So they took on eToro. They took on Gatsby, and I spent my next year and a half after the close of that deal integrating into eToro and starting to bring it into UK, Europe, at which point one of my partners at eToro, while at eToro, had been playing with ChatGPT in the operations area, who was running ops for eToro, and said, gee, this is a really interesting tool that we might be able to use for customer support in various ways. And that's where Ask Clio came from. I was at the beginning just an investor and kind of watching what he was doing, but I left eToro earlier and had the opportunity to, we're a year and a half into it now, to start helping get Ask Clio off the ground and into the marketplace, and that's where we are today.
Wow, that's fascinating. I mean, that's quite the roller coaster of an experience going from like a hardcore corporate company to consulting to a startup of your own. I'm curious, if we were to just go back a little bit to Instanet, because I think that's kind of profound that, your timing and your intersect there was just as, electronic trading was coming in. What were some of the like top one, two lessons that you learned about building businesses within businesses?
Yeah, it's a great question. Let's start with InstaNet itself because, as I said, it lost money when I got there. It had been losing money for 15 years. It lost money for another 5 years after. And I think it was the example, and it doesn't happen today like that anymore. It happens a lot quicker. You either succeed or you fail in a much shorter time frame. But very often we have these ideas that come into a marketplace, and there are people who get it, and there are other people who are fearful of it or simply don't see it and understand it. So learning to tell your story when you're way outside the box and learning how to put it in a position. Positioning is really the key word I would use. So the people you're talking to can relate to something that either doesn't make sense or seems negative or they don't understand. Putting it in a place where they can understand it, that was the magic bullet. That's actually what helped InstaNet take off is when we were selling to both the buy side, the investor community, and the sell side, the broker dealer community. The broker dealer community wanted nothing to do with us because all we could do is cut margins. The investment community relied on the brokers to do their trading for them, and they were kind of scared of electronic trading in that they were taking control of their own order flow. And if there was a mistake, that buy side trader, they were responsible, not the trader at Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, whatever firm they used to trade with. So there was a big fear factor getting involved with technology to do your job. And then on the other side, there was a business fear of, oh my God, if these guys succeed, they're going to eat our lunch, which is what eventually happened. And a lesson I think of as I say that, the broker dealers that we succeeded with were not the top tier at first. It was the second and third tier. They recognized if we can make this work for us, it'll help us compete with the big firms. Right? So the big firms are like, stay the hell away. The little guys are like, yeah, that might work. I'll try it. And it did work, and they tried it, and then the big guys had to come later. On the buy side, it was more if you think about a bell curve, you've always got people on that far right of the bell curve who are just thinking differently, more open to new ideas and so on. And what we found is you just have to talk, and this is sales 101, right? You got to talk to a lot of people and find the ones that fit. So we just attacked the buy side. We found the more sophisticated players, the ones who knew that Wall Street was ripping them off to some extent and wanted more control, and help put that together. And then slowly but surely, InstaNet as a trading network, it's about liquidity, buyers and sellers to trade. If you don't have liquidity, you don't get trades. People get disappointed, they walk away. So it was about getting that ball rolling, and then once it gets rolling, it became a really big ball rolling fast downhill, and we had a really fun run once we finally got.
Yeah, well, that's incredible. And naturally, it sounds like you tapped into your the skills of your salesman's piece, right, around messaging and story and positioning it such that you get a product market fit, and it resonates with your customers here. So I'm curious, when we go from Instanet to Gatsby, and then you have the acquisition, and now you're in the startup scene, the thread along the way. How would you describe that? Like, what connects you from one in terms of your story, right? What connects you from Instanet to Gatsby to that? Like, what was that passion or motivation?
Yeah, I think personally we all have different things that drive us that we find fun and enjoyable. For me, being outside the box and trying to get inside the box and trying to make things work from start from nothing and create something, that's exciting and that's fun and it's hard. And while you're starting, while you're trying, it's really hard. Instant early days, I was calling people up, nobody wanted to take the call. Gatsby early days, we're competing with Robinhood and Morgan Stanley and Charlie, Schwab, every firm out there, and it's just tough to get guys onto the platform. So being passionate, in my case about the markets, being passionate about whatever the it is that you do, and figuring out how to turn that passion and communicate not just the passion, but why you're passionate. So with the option trading, I knew there were people that were getting their heads ripped off every day because they didn't know what to do, they didn't know how to do it, and they were throwing money away. And coming up with a product that would help them not throw money away, we used to talk about the guardrails, so they wouldn't make the really dumb trade. Like option trades. I'll never forget my favorite story. The guy calls up. We're on the desk, right? We're founders, so we're taking the customer calls, And I'm on the desk at 3:45. The market's almost closed. This guy did a trade. He's like, did I just lose my $200? And I looked to see what he did, and he bought an option that expired in 15 minutes, and it needed to go up 10% for him to make money. That doesn't happen. And that's the sort of thing that can happen in the option market if you don't really understand all the pieces to the puzzle. So that was a painful lesson. None of us like throwing money away, but that's a lesson that people often learn, whether it's equities or options or anything else, until you kind of understand the foundational important parts of that instrument you're trading, how it works, how the markets work, etc. You can make those mistakes, and with option trading, it's a lot easier to make them. So the education component, and that's really interesting actually now that you mention it. So InstaNet was about education, right? Educating the buy side. Here's why it matters to try to save that eighth of a point. At the time, stocks traded in eighths, 12 cents. Right? Today it's micro fraction of a penny. But we were trying to sell the buy side on, you have to buy the right stock, and you're getting the research from the sell side, but the trade matters. At that time, in the 80s and 90s, most buy-side investors didn't really care or think about the trade, getting into the position or out of it. They worried about picking the right stocks and the timing. So we had to educate. Gatsby was all about educating retail on, A, how do you do it, but B, again, how not to do the dumb things that lose you money. Because option trading today, that's how brokerage firms make money. Equities is basically stocks are a loss leader. There's not much commission there. There's just no way to make money without huge volumes in other aspects of the business. But option trading, brokers still make money. And when brokers are making money, retail's at risk. So as a retail investor, you want to understand the game and what you can do to give yourself the best shot to make money on your trade and not to put that money into the broker's pocket.
I see what you're saying. So along the way, as you sort of go through this, it sounds like the why behind for you, it's the education piece. It really resonates with you on that level, be it on the buy side, the customers, whatever the segment is. So if that's the case, if we pull the thread all the way through to Ask Clio, what's the why for you, and how does that come into place when it comes to Ask Clio?
Yeah, Ask Clio is really cool because it's, sometimes an InstaNet was an example that you can see in your own mind, this is going to happen, right? Meaning at that time, electronic trading is going to happen. At this time, AI as a customer support tool, as a chatbot or other aspects of it are going to become a normal integrated part of investing, trading, everything you do with your financial advisor or your brokerage firm and so on. So when you see that, then the question becomes, okay, how do we build the right product for the market? And then secondly, and this is always the hard part at the beginning, how do we get traction? How do we find people that we can share that goal with who want to take the risk of being one of the first firms out there to do it? So for example, I talked to someone at Charles Schwab, it's got to be a year ago, and my assumption has been the big firms, Schwab and Morgan Stanley, et cetera, they're going to do this on their own. It's important, it's a big part of the business, and they have the wherewithal to do it. Second and third tier firms, they're not going to have the wherewithal to do it. They'll look for folks like us to do it for them with a white label. And those first firms, they are yet to come out, for the most part, with an AI product for the customer. They have it internally. So right now, if you call Charles Schwab, the person you're talking to, the financial advisor, they have the ability to ask questions using an AI app internally to get answers for you, the client, but they're not putting it in front of you yet. And that's pretty typical with a very large firm, with a very large legal and compliance department who are being very careful about a new technology, while the smaller and mid-sized firms, not that we're not careful about compliance and security, but we are super careful about it, and the second or third tier firm is not as maybe paranoid going too far, but they're not as worried about the regulator jumping on them if they're careful about understanding what the rules and regs are and following them.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like naturally when it comes to like your ideal client profile or the tier twos that you're describing, they've got a different why for them, right? Like for them, there's a different motivator behind it compared to like the big, the guys who've been around for a while. And so that's interesting because now you're finding a very interesting niche that sort of brings a lot of different things together. Your passion for education, be it on the buy side to the companies, to the individuals, to the brokerage, but also now it's like, hey, how do we actually stay in touch with what's happening today? In this case, AI, automation, whatever it may be, and how do we now educate other clients or B2B businesses that can sort of leverage this, which is really exciting because I'm now, so just to pivot a little bit, you, you've sort of touched on, dare I say, the spectrum of businesses, right? You're very Fortune 500, InstaNet, large corporate consulting where it's more influential style, right? You're paid, and then startups where you're on like the ground and you're building this up. And across the board, there was something that you mentioned a little while back around InstaNet, which was InstaNet started as a 50 people team, went up to 1,000, a couple million to billion. That's huge scale, huge growth. And there are growing pains that come with that. So I just want to segue a little bit into talent. And I'm curious here is, as you see both on the corporate side as well as the startup side, how do you navigate, finding the right talent? What processes come into play? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the first thing I'd say, the most important thing you do are the people you hire, because the people you hire, and the smaller you are, the more they matter, right? Because they're a higher percentage of your people. But those hiring decisions are huge because they're what make the company. I mean, I'd much rather have the second tier product and the first tier team, because business is done person to person. Whether it's a technology product or legal or accounting, whatever, it's all about people. So the most important thing to remember is how important it is. The second thing is, when you make a mistake, understand the cost of it. And I say that because we all tend to rush. And InstaNet, when we started to grow really fast on a trajectory, we need a guy here, you need a girl here, you need people all over the place, and you just want to pull trigger and get them in the seat. What you learn is, if you rush and you get them in that seat and they didn't work out, you took the time to hire them, you took the time to train them, you took the time to have them work for you and figure out they didn't work out. You take the time to counsel them out of your firm legally, and then you start the process again. So when you make a mistake, it's 6, 9 months before you get to that point you wanted to get to. So that's number one. Recognize how important it is. Take your time and do it right. How do I take my time and do it right? Understand the skills and the knowledge and the personality of the person that you need to hire. And I had a little model that had those as 3 key components. What skills do I need? What knowledge base do I need? And what personality do I need for this role? And I would put my metrics down on what I'm looking at. Is an engineering role, a sales role, a operations role. They're all different. And then you never find the perfect candidate, but you do want to find the candidate that fills your must-haves. They must have a base knowledge of Wall Street, or the learning curve is too long. They must have sales skills, or they're not going to be able to, whatever it is. Good personality to talk to my clients. So there are all these different pieces to that puzzle, and really understanding them. And again, taking your time to go through a process. I like having a few members of the team all interview somebody so we can all agree they're the right person. And eventually, in that mode, you pull trigger. But I think the most important thing is just, it's so important every time you do it to get it right. So take your time, have a process, think it through, and you're still going to make mistakes, but you will make fewer mistakes and more good hires in that area.
Yeah, I want to dig a little bit into that because I think this is going to be pretty cool. Like you said, bad hires can be really expensive. What were some signals or tests that you used to be able to reduce the odds of a mismatch or a misfit?
Great question. It is questioning technique. It's having conversations like this with the person I'm thinking about hiring, and trying to get that person to relax and be real. Ignore or not ignore.
You're
Don't
hired. No,
focus.
I'm kidding.
Don't focus where they went to school and where they worked. Right. Those are two things we look at. Right. Oh my God, they went to Harvard or they worked at Goldman. I'm not saying discount them, but there are awful people who went to Harvard. There are awful people who worked at Goldman. It's a screen, and it means something. But really, what matters is talk to them. Figure out what do they know. Like, experience is not big with me. If you've been there 10 years and the other one's been there 5 years, if the 5-year person has more knowledge and skills, that's a no-brainer. I don't care that they've, been there for 10 years. It's what do they know? What do they bring to the table? And then the personality aspects of what kind of person are they? For the engineer, they can be very introspective and, happy to be sitting in their cubby doing whatever forever. But the operations person who's going to interface between different departments, the customer support, they need to be people. They need to be able to look you in the eye and have a good conversation and be comfortable answering the questions. So back to, I think, how we started this, it's about having a conversation, asking questions. Ask questions. Why? How? People we all, I think, have a pattern. We go into an interview and there are certain things we want to say, there are certain things we don't. You have to get through that. And asking what I call open-ended questions is the way to get through that. Why did tell me, it's a classic interview question, tell me something you're not good at, but man, you want to dive 20 levels deep. Okay, why aren't you good at it? What experiences have you had when it didn't work? Tell me about a win you've had, great, but then dig into the win. Because, people make up stories. Dig into that win and let them show you they really understand how and why they were able to accomplish it, whether it was, again, making the sale, taking the customer who was pissed off and turning them around and making them a happy customer, the things that matter for the role that you're focused on and how that person feels like they're going to work for you.
So what I'm hearing really is outside of like the must-haves, right? Like the skills and the knowledge, the core piece, it sounds like when it comes to the personability of it is how genuine or how connected they are with what they're saying. And I feel like it's oftentimes hard to like measure that or put a finger to it, but how you're saying to really just dig deep really helps out with that. And so I'm curious then if we were to look at that, I guess a two-part question, and so it'll be parallel streams. First here, it's, we took the example of InstaNet, right? 50 to 1,000. Naturally, you're now at a startup, completely different scene. How do you hire differently at a lean AI startup versus a billion-dollar trading firm?
Yeah, it's obviously different. I think in the bigger firm, if you think about roles and responsibilities, the bigger the firm, the more narrow they get because he's going to be a trader, she's going to be a customer support person. At a startup, you're generally relied upon. You have a focus, but you need to do other stuff, and you need to be maybe a little more, little less buttoned up, a little more open to change. There are a lot of corporate folks. You put them in that role, they're great at that role, but do not move them. Do not ask them to change.
I got you.
A lot of people just aren't comfortable with that. We were joking. I was with an old friend who from a different business, and we were joking about who moved my cheese. This famous book from 30 years ago, I think, but it's about change, and that's the only thing that hasn't changed is that change. It happens a lot faster now, but change, from the 1800s or 800s till today, that's what life and world is about. Stuff changes, and in businesses like this, like we're talking about, particularly today, you've got to be ready to make that pivot. And it's not necessarily a 90-degree pivot, but even a 10-degree pivot, and being open-minded and comfortable knowing, well, we were wrong about that assumption. We can do this instead or this as well.
Mm. I mean, when you share that, it didn't really connect it in my mind the way that it just did. That change is constant, right? And that's a bit of a oxymoron or a paradox, either or. And to be able to, to answer the question, really, it's about their nimbleness or their agility to adapt. But on a deeper level, it's just about confronting change and what that really looks like, be it challenging your own assumptions or the externality of whatever the circumstances is and how you adapt to it.
You're reminding me of when Gatsby was bought by eToro. I was back in that corporate environment. eToro has 1,000 employees, and they have a hierarchy. And we were the little, subsidiary in America of the subsidiary in America of the big firm overseas. And it was getting back into that, and I had to make, we as a team had to make a lot of changes. We were used to running our own show. We were 5 years into it. We've been quite successful. We sold the firm, and then boom, you're back down to being, a peon in a big organization where management has goals and objectives they want to hit. They're counting on you to be able to turn that crank and adjust yourself to do it. And it's not just the nimbleness; it's the head that allows you to be comfortable making that change, because that's usually the issue. It's not capability; it's comfort and ability to be open-minded and not worry about what's that going to bring me. Am I going to be able to handle that? Am I going to be able to manage that? Some people
I see.
are very uncomfortable.
Yeah. Would you say that I mean one of the words that we could use would be willingness?
Well, definitely that. It's got to be willingness, but people might say the word yes, and then reality hits, and they're it's not that they're not willing; they want to. They're just so uncomfortable with it. They have a hard time with it, and you've probably seen a lot of that. We probably all have seen a lot of that. You just don't necessarily think about it in that context.
Yeah. That's fascinating because I mean, at the end of the day, what you're really summarizing is how do two human people, two humans interact. And ultimately, there's going to be some things that are said that, aren't agreed upon, and there's the element of how do I embrace this and how do we move forward with that? That's fascinating. I'm starting to go off gear here, so let me reel it back in a little bit to the talent side. You mentioned the three things, right? Knowledge, skill, and personability. I want to just dig a little bit into the skills piece, especially with what's happening today. Looking ahead, what skills do you see becoming most critical within fintech as AI reshapes the industry?
I'm more the business guy than the technology guy, and it's always frustrating to me that I don't know as much as I wish I knew about the skills needed to succeed on the technology side. As a senior manager, you'd have really smart people reporting to you, and they're the ones who are building it or operating it, whatever the it is. And I don't pretend to know what skills are needed to make it happen. From a management standpoint, the skills are a lot of the things we just talked about in terms of people who can manage others and inspire them and lead them rather than take a big stick and whack them on the back and try to make them do what they want. Leadership, is a really big part of it. And in a startup, it's kind of internal leadership. You also need to be a leader for your investors. You need to be a leader for your clients because when you're little, you deal with everybody, all around from client to investor to the other participants in the firm. And then on the business side, it's back to that idea of flexibility and just a wide skill set range or ability to pick up new skills. So, for example, we get bought by eToro, and they wanted us to introduce U.S. equity options to Europe, UK, and that was one of my projects. And I don't know a whole lot about regulation. The institutional world and the retail world, just as a quick aside, radically different. I was a Series 24, registered principal in the institutional world. It never really mattered. I had to be. It was a stamp you needed as a manager when people work for you. In the retail world, it matters a lot. There are plethora of rules and regulations for your customers, for your employees, for the way you do business. So my point is simply, when I moved to that retail world, first I had a whole new set of stuff to learn, and then we moved to eToro world, and now it's about the international regulations. And what I learned was everybody's different. The UK, the EU, Asia, Middle East, Africa, each area has their own regulators, in a good way, are worried about protecting their citizens from the evil brokers all around the world who want to come in and take their money, but they all do it differently. So, getting yourself up to speed and understanding what that meant in the back office and how you had to actually clear trades in different countries, even though it's the exact same trade on a U.S. market, how money movement worked, which is a really big issue today. The learning curve, again, super steep. But I've been at it a long time, and I know that every time I take on, Ask Clio included, new role responsibilities, I've got a big learning curve. So, just having your head in a place that says, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to have a lot to learn, and that's going to be a lot of my, first X amount of time is building my own knowledge base and foundation so I can have intelligent conversations and know what the hell I'm talking about, regardless of who I'm talking to.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that. I mean, to me, when I hear this, to there's a lot of like rich insights within this conversation for our audience, and I think as I think about what you shared, I guess the question I now have as like a key takeaway is, what's one advice you would give to fintech founders, on their first GTM hire?
I think if it's the go-to-market hire, one of the really hard things today, if we're B2B, so we're selling a white label solution to other businesses, and there are two, basic models you look at, B2B, B2C. B2C is really hard because of what's going on in terms of competition in the market, and B2B is really hard because of the difficulty today. I grew up as a cold calling salesman. Cold calling meaning I had a phone, I picked it up, I called someone I didn't know. But in those days, they talked to you. They might say, no, I don't want to see you, but they would pick their phone up and you could talk to them, right? Today, you can't talk to people. Today, people will generally not respond to the emails. I mean, the percentages, you're lucky if you're getting 0.05% of your emails looked at, let alone responded to. So learning how to get out there and bring in customers is obviously huge. And at the very beginning, when you have no reputation, when you have no brand, and especially if you're kind of outside the box and you're in a regulatory environment as we are, where people are nervous about what we're going to put in front of our clients, it's really, really a tough challenge. to find the people, to get in front of the people, etc. So I'm not a buyer of hiring people simply because they know someone. My experience is that, it can work. It generally doesn't work that well. But you want to find people who have the right headspace and have the right skill set and experience that they're going to be able to, retail or institutional, go out there and find those clients for you. And it's hard.
Yeah. Thank you. No, I appreciate that. And I'm sure, those who when you stumble across this, podcast and dig into the advice of what's it like to hire, especially for fintech founders, I'm sure that, at the risk of stating the obvious, it is, I think, important to hear the obvious that you got to be able to be connected with the individual and sort of identify that connection that exists within them between their mind and their heart, and to be able to recognize that.
One way I think about this, when you have a small firm, and we're today, my partner and I, the co-founder, he really founded, and I'm holding his spot as CEO, and we have a number of engineers and developers. There are less than 10 of us today, right? So we really go to market fully, and we have a couple of customers just up and running, a couple coming down, so we're not far from that. But if we have 8 people, each of us is 12% of the human resource of this company, and that's huge. Back to the big corporation where each person is, maybe 0.05% of the human resource. So that's why those initial hires are so critical, and finding people that have a little bit of depth and breadth to what they can do so they can wear more than one hat, and personality-wise that can handle. Startups are hard. I mean, I've been doing this a little over a year. I thought it was going to take much less time to get that initial traction. I always think that. I'm always wrong. I think most startup founders would say the same. And you mentioned earlier at InstaNet, we started a lot of new businesses within that brokerage firm. We did soft dollars, we did research, we had a research product, an electronic research product, and each one is like a mini startup. And to your point earlier, I think you learn how to get the right people in place and then think ahead so you can scale. I'm always thinking about the next steps, positives and negatives. One of the interesting things with modern brokerage firms, the ratio of clients to staff at not every broker, right? I would say there are 3 big buckets of brokers. You've got the traditional Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, a wealth advisor, relatively small number of clients with a personal relationship. You've got the E-Trades and Schwabs with really good advisors internally on the phone, generally not tied to an individual, but they have a pretty good ratio of internal staff to clients that they can manage. The newest firms have a tiny ratio of internal staff to clients. And the story that everybody has heard is during the meme craze, when Robinhood had real issues, whatever they are. I don't think they were evil at the time. They got riled by the market, but there were so many clients that had questions. There were clients that didn't get responded to for months, plural. And that wasn't because Robinhood were bozos. That was because there were so many clients and so many issues and so many questions. Just getting through them was really, really, really hard. Every modern brokerage platform has that issue periodically. If you go down during the day and people are trying to trade, how do you tell them? People are like, oh my God, I can't trade. It happens all the time on every app. Your feed went down, the market went down, one of your internal order management system went down, your customers can't trade. It's really hard to communicate to them all at once. So these are challenges for modern brokerage firms that didn't exist in the traditional sense because you could pick your phone up and call your person.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I mean, if we're now pivoting a little bit or shifting gears into Ask Clio, right? So, from pioneering electronic trading to shipping an AI support layer for brokerages, it's clear you've repeatedly turned complex tech into an everyday value. So, right. So, if we now dig into a little bit Ask Clio, and I think where the conversation is headed, I think it's going to be very interesting because Ask Clio is here is about AI customer support. You're starting to talk about hiring the right folks, and then at the end of the day, it's a people's business. There's a ratio of internal staff to your clients. So I guess the question, that this naturally leads me to is, what are some of the biggest challenges that brokerages face today when it comes to client support and churn?
So we talked about one of them, which is simply the physical ability to reply. And we'll come back to that because that's where AI is going to really, really add a huge amount of value. A second one is the ability to educate in terms of, what is my product, how does it work, and what do you do? Because again, it's got to be all online. It's not, it's not me leading you down a path. It has to be the product leading you down a path. And because there are so many brokers out there, one of the things that was really interesting to me is I learned most of my clients at Gatsby and eToro, they had multiple brokerage accounts, not one or two, but 5 or 6. And there were 2 reasons they did this. One was simply it's really free to try, right? I could sign up, I could try it. Maybe I liked it better than the one I used, maybe I didn't. I didn't close it, I left it. So I always had, the generic client, I have 4, 5, 6 accounts. And if you didn't make me happy one day because you couldn't answer my question or I couldn't get you to find out, why X, Y, or Z did or didn't happen, I go to another one. So that's a huge challenge. If you're a broker, a retail broker, what you're worried about is 2 things. I got to get new clients and churn. Because once you got them, business 101, whether you're GE or us, I don't want to lose a client I've already got on board. It's expensive to get clients and I don't want to churn them. So I got to keep them happy. And that's where customer support, whatever that means, however we define that, is so important. And in terms of getting them, a lot of people don't think about the fact step 1 is they sign up for the app or the website. Step 2, they've got to fund their account. Or I can call them an account, but they're not doing me any good. In fact, they're taking resources. Step 3, I've got to get them to trade. So if you're Robinhood or Public or eToro or any of these firms, they've all got that same challenge. It's not just getting people to come on board, which is really hard because it's a really crowded market. I've got to get them to fund their account, I've got to get them to trade, and I've got to make them happy and keep them. Because again, I do the wrong thing and they're unhappy, they're going to go to the next guy down the block. And that's one of the really big challenges, along with that scale issue of it's hard for me to communicate with my clients only because I have so many clients and not so many humans. And this, I think, is where AI is radically going to make it for a better experience, not just for the brokerage industry, but I can't wait till Verizon gets AI. Because, man, I spent 5 hours on the phone last night trying to get my cell service back up. And it's like the nightmare from hell, right? I mean, you're dealing with people all over the world. They don't know what you're talking about. They don't have the right information. That's what AI can do. It can bring all the right information for you, the client, in one place. And it can then answer the questions that you, the client, have about your personal situation. So with Ask Clio, we look at 3 different buckets when we think about how do I, what is the support need for a client? Number 1, clients want to learn about investing or trading. What's the S&P index? What's any index? What's an ETF versus a mutual fund? There are a million questions like that. And today, AI does a great job answering them. The second bucket is my firm. Do you give tax advice? Do you have a 401k? Do you have a Roth IRA? Do you have fill in the blank? How do I open the account? How do I change a million questions? AI does a great job answering those questions. It isn't rocket science, but every firm is different. I put a deposit in the other day. How long does it take? Will it take for that deposit to actually hit my account so I can trade? It's different with different accounts. Margin rates are different. There's so many differences. So clients have those questions. If I can get them an answer instantly and not have to take time from a human, that means my humans, my customer support staff, have time to really spend on the tougher questions, on the more complex issues. So bucket 1, investing. Bucket 2, we're trading. Bucket 2, my firm. And bucket 3, which is where we have a unique aspect, we think, is my account. How many dividends did I earn this year? What is my portfolio ratio today, equities, fixed income, options? I did a trade the other day. Why did I pay, $48 for that? I thought I should have paid $47.75. So what we're doing is we're plugging into the back office of the brokerage clients we have. So we have all of the clients' account information, and they can ask very specific questions about their own account. So those were our thesis when we started. There were these 3 sets of questions that we can answer. And then as you get into it, you realize, and this is always the case with the new technology, oh wow, there's some other cool stuff here. So we take in a data feed of live data, we take in a data feed of historical data. I'll focus on equities, but everything I'm saying could be for any asset class. So I can say to Ask Clio, or in this case, whatever brokerage firm I have it on, show me my portfolio and show me the PE, market cap, and earnings date for each of the stocks in my portfolio. And then my next question might be, I'm thinking of buying Microsoft. Add Microsoft to that table. So I can start doing research and discovery about my portfolio, investments I might want to make. One of the really cool features, language doesn't matter. We did a demo last week for the first time for a Kuwaiti broker, and they said, do you handle Arabic? We said, we think we do. We've never done Arabic. And she sent us a note in the Zoom chat, and we plugged it into Ask Clio in Arabic, and it answered in Arabic. And the next question is, was it accurate? Yes, it was. So, that's fascinating, because today, a lot of the growth, a lot of what's important for fintechs here and abroad is cross-border. So if you're a U.S. firm and you've got clients in South Korea and you don't have a whole lot of folks who speak South Korean, it's an issue. Now, a lot of them will speak English because we're lucky, we're American, and people all over the world speak English. But man, you want to be able to be local language. So one of the beauties of AI as a broker is I can have clients anywhere. They can ask me questions in their language and get answers in their language. And that's super powerful.
Yeah, that's really cool because it sounds like what you've done is you've sort of charted out the customer journey in terms of what it takes for them to onboard to start actually using the app and the common friction pain points, but then added your touch where it starts to answer questions where I think the assumption would have been, oh, I need to actually do it myself or speak to another human who knows the back end. But really now it's like, well, no, not really. We can add an interface there that could still triage and get, answer the, the more commonly questions, but naturally still have the ability to get you in touch with a human when it gets to that point.
Yep. And another aspect, and again, we didn't think of this, 6 months ago, but somebody asked us and was like, wow, that's cool. We can do things. Client wants to change their email. They can ask, what email do you have for my account? Oh, I want to change that email. And if the broker wants to give access to the client to do it, they can. So for onboarding, I gave you all the information. My account, this happens all the time. My account's not open. Why? Usually a human has to go through a list and say, oh, your license was expired, or oh, your passport didn't work, or your green card didn't match up with what we thought it should be. That can now be automated. So you can ask that question and the system can tell you, here's what the issue is, and if you can give us a new license or give us a new date or redo your social security number, it didn't come in right, we can get you to the next step. So taking actions is kind of the next iteration, not just looking at information, but doing things. And by the way, I'll mention, I want to mention compliance because it's really important here, obviously. I was the compliance officer at Gatsby and for the options in eToro, and that is, again, a whole different world than the institutional world. It's so important, back to my stories about regulators overseas. So what FINRA, the regulatory body for broker-dealers, and the SEC have essentially said, not officially, there's no paper, but if you look it up and you do your research, they're saying treat AI like a human, meaning you have to train it, you have to monitor it, you have to test it, and you have to archive it, right? So we have to make sure that when people are asking questions, testing it is you do the test question and make sure it's giving the answer and check it. And when FINRA comes in and audits you, you can show them that you've done that. Archive it means the systems that brokers have already, where every conversation with a client is archived. That's got to be plugged into the AI as well. So we're really treating compliance as if we're a traditional brokerage firm, but instead of humans, we're doing the same things with AI. And SOC 2 for security. We're not taking the actual client social security numbers, names into our server. That all stays with the client. We just get a anonymized number. So we're very focused, and you have to be. Anybody in fintech today, if you want to have partners, and if you want big partners, you've got to really be on top of your game from a regulatory, compliance, and security standpoint.
Got you. This might sound like a silly question. Are you SOC 2 certified?
Yes.
Oh, amazing. Okay. So what you're saying is you've got the SOC 2 as well, and on top of that, you have all these other precautions that are in line with FINRA and whatnot. Amazing. That's very cool. And so, how do you actually? You have, that makes sense, right? Because at the end of the day, if I'm the customer, it's like it's my money, it's my data. Like like with the world of fear and all that, like I can imagine the prevalence of that. And you mentioned compliance, so curiosity here's how do you communicate the SOC 2 and the guardrails to help reduce the perceived risks for first-time buyers or first-time customers for Ask Clio?
Right. So again, we're B2B. So we're
Yeah,
talking to the brokerage executive,
brokers.
and we
Yeah.
have to make that executive comfortable that this element will be as safe for their clients as whatever they're putting out there. They're very focused on that. So I have to give them comfort that I'm not going to get them in trouble. And compliance folks are risk averse. and some more so than others. So in a good way, they're really, really careful, and you got to have your act together if you want to get through that gate.
Yeah, yeah. It's one. I guess it's one of those things that you know you got to have it. People might not ask for it, but when people do, you better have it, right? Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
some
So
don't. That's a very good point. Like we're
yeah,
talking to crypto firms, it doesn't come up.
yeah. No,
The
I
security
totally get
does.
that.
The security does, but not the compliance, because everybody's
Yeah.
worried about different stuff.
That's interesting. So I guess to sort of get a little more into Ask Clio, one question I've got that sort of came to mind is where is Ask Clio today? Because I mean, you've done a lot of legwork. You mentioned yourself, you thought it'd take you a year, it took you a little longer. There's been solid development that's happened. You've got your regulatory and compliance in check. So where's Ask Clio today in terms of product pillars, deployments, early usage, or other metrics that you're watching?
Yeah, great question. So we've got a half dozen firms that are somewhere in the process of they just signed an agreement to go or they're in production. Now, what we're doing, and this, again, is I guess I'll call it advice I've read and I'll share now. Everything is about traction when you're a startup. Traction meaning if I want to raise money to be able to go to market in a big way, I need to prove my idea. To prove my idea, I need to have traction with real clients. So getting those first clients on board and getting them into production, getting them into testing, so we can show that we're not just telling a story, it actually works and you can use it, is critical. To do that, we're making it really easy for people to sign up. So it doesn't cost anything to get started. If you never go into production, you never have to pay us. So if you want to try it and see how you like it, you've signed an agreement that says you will pay us if it works. But if it doesn't work to your satisfaction, you can walk away, no harm, no foul. Really importantly, it's a very light lift. You can get up and running with the first two buckets of having market information and having your firm information, your FAQs, etc. You can be up and running literally 2 hours. You can get the SDK on your website. If you want to start plugging in APIs so we get your proprietary data, so we get your account information, that's going to take a few weeks, not a few hours. But it's really easy with the tools that exist today and the fact that most of the brokerage business has turned into a business of APIs, clearing firm to broker, broker to vendor, etc. And we're just fitting right into that world. So, back to your question, we're trying to make it easy to get started. We're making the cost a time and effort cost, not a financial cost. And, on the financial side, the pricing model is cool too. A few $100s a month plus a per question fee. So our business model says if your clients love what we've done for you and they're using it a lot, we get to make money. But if it's just a nice to have and they touch it lightly, you're not going to pay out very much money, but you're going to have a really nice feature to help your clients out.
That's interesting. I don't think I've actually heard of a per question pricing model in that regard. And that I bet also helps reduce a little bit of the pressure. Like right now that I've got it and no one uses, what do I do? But here you're sort of incentivizers or rewarded that behavior as well.
Exactly. And the early, there's not a lot of data, but the early data we've seen, Bank of America had a report, Public had a report, people who are using these AI chatbots to ask, questions are engaging at a much higher rate than those who don't, or not even those who don't, than their average client. As I said earlier, open the account, fund the account, trade, and we're all, as brokerage executives, trying to get them to the next step. And what Bank of America found in banking and what Public found in the brokerage business was the people who are using their chatbots are getting through that progression much faster and trading more frequently.
Got you. So it's like a validation case really that says this really does work. It helps you move your customers, down the funnel, so to speak.
Exactly.
Incredible. So now, I mean, thank you for sharing about Ask Cleo. Like, I really appreciate, the transparency there. I'm curious now, if I flip the gear a little bit, in the world of Ask Cleo, what are some of the biggest challenges that you're facing in the industry right now?
Well, for Ask Clio ourselves, our big challenge is just getting in front of the right people. As a guy that's done, been a sales and marketing guy forever, I am so frustrated with my inability to get in front of decision makers to tell them the story for various reasons. People are busy. As I said earlier, cold calls are gone, emails are gone. So it's really leveraging on your relationships. All of our current clients are, old friends, friends of friends, or, maybe an early investor who had, a firm that was they knew and were familiar with and sent us to them. But that's our big issue right now. In the brokerage business, I think it's what I said earlier in terms of the challenges that make it make sense are these issues of really tough, not just competition, but trying to keep your clients happy. And when stuff happens, being able to respond to the client. And one of the examples I mentioned earlier, every brokerage firm, stuff happens and you go down. Maybe once a quarter, maybe once every 6 months, but it's going to happen. And what do? Ask Clio gives you the ability to put a note out that says, the New York Stock Exchange is down, or our data feed went down, or automatic. We think we'll be up in an hour. And what's going to happen over time, clients, us, we will get trained to know that if that vendor I'm using has a chatbot, I can go to it, ask a question, and get an answer. Most of the chatbots we use today are literally worthless or less than because they don't work. And we spend 5 minutes realizing they don't work before we have to call the 800 number and get frustrated. What we're going to learn is they can work, and as more and more AI gets plugged into these dumb chatbots and they work, it's going to be a beautiful situation for retail because we will be able to get our questions answered and not be sitting on the phone or waiting for the email, for days or hours.
It's funny. I smiled because you reminded me of this time I was going through a chat bar. I think what I was trying to do. I think I was trying to change an address or something like that, and I just kept prompting. At one point, I was like, "Oh man, I'm done. Like, give me the agent. Like, let's move on." And so I hear that. I hear that a lot, and I'm excited to see this sort of come to life. So when you mention your biggest challenges today, I mean, naturally for Ask Clio, it's about getting new customers, and I think that would be the bane of every startup's existence. And so if we were to look now, instead of customer facing, but more in the back end, what are some of the bottlenecks in your current operations that you experience today? It could be pipeline generation, I don't know, compliance reviews, onboarding, whatever it may be.
Everything is a learning curve right now. What we're doing hasn't been done before. So every time we're attacking a new project, it might look easy, and it turns out it wasn't as easy as we thought. It can't work, or it can work, but it's going to take 10 hours and not 2 hours. So we're just kind of, number one, I think is probably prioritizing, and this is, business 101 generic stuff. What should I be working on? What are these 4 things that I really want to do? Do I flip it upside down? Do I keep them like this? So figuring out what should we do first, what's going to be the most attractive thing to get people up and running, and then just based on my history and having blown myself up a number of times with various things, what do I need to worry about so when it happens, we're ready to manage it. So when we're a tiny team, right? Every startup, if we go down, and our developer in Ukraine that's working on this part of the project is sleeping, how are we going to put a safety net there so we can get right back up and keep our clients happy? And that's every startup should be thinking about that, because once you hit and once you start to grow, both the fun start and the problems start, because all of a sudden you're putting stress on systems that hadn't had stress before, you're doing things that hadn't been done before, and there is a mess that's going to come out in various pieces. And you need to make sure you have the resources and the humans and the attitude to know what's going to happen and to deal with it, because those early customers, you do not want to tick them off. You want to keep them happy because they're going to give you the recommendation for the next one, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I totally hear that. So now I'm curious. I mean, with all that's happening in the back end, it's exciting days. Let's say 6 months or 12 months from today. What does success look like 6 months from today or 12 months from today?
No, it's a great question. 2 elements. One is having dozens, if not hundreds, of customers, and 2, and by that I mean on the B2B side. But the more exciting part is their customers using the system and asking hundreds and thousands of questions and getting good answers that help them make their life easier in terms of just administrative stuff, and help educate them and help them invest and trade better. Because that's what it's all about. That's what every broker is trying to do for their clients, and we're a tool to help those brokers do that. So, when I think about the future, I want to get there. That's the exciting part.
That is very cool because I mean, to me, I think that's a huge measure of success for any startup, but in particular for someone that's motivated by their why, which is education. And in this case, it's a very interesting intersect of education. It's the customer success, the brokerages of what's doable, but also for you to put it out there in the world that hey, chatbots actually have a very valuable place within this entire process when backed by AI. So I mean, I definitely see the passion and the motivation that comes through. I guess one last question I have for you, now that I put it in this way, is where are there misconceptions about AI that you experience when you try to go through this? Or to flip it around, where do you see as the next stage for something like this when AI gets plugged in? Because I mean, the way you described it, right? Like today, FAQs exist, chatbots exist. You plug in AI, you get them to level up. What does like the next real level look like when it comes to something like that?
There are a million things to talk about. I'll pick one that I think is cool. InstaNet was owned by Reuters. Reuters today, owned by some stock exchange, they're a provider of market data, analytics, and information. Bloomberg, right? There are all these systems out there that are pretty complex that let you do analysis and set up your ability to trade and invest. And E-Trade and Public and Robinhood, every retail brokerage firm has that. And it's always been kind of a heavy client development effort, software client development effort to build the products that you use to do your research and your analysis. I think chatbots are going to end up answering an awful lot of the questions that today you need to go to a screen that answers questions. Like I can say, tell me Apple's PE. I don't have to quote Apple. I can say, show me these five stocks, which one has the largest earnings growth rate over the past 5 years. So I think today it's very basic, ask a question, get an answer. I think it's going to kind of meld together with the more traditional charting, graphing, analytical capabilities, and it will be much easier for clients to ask plain English questions rather than have to understand those screens. Like if you want to do option trades, most brokerage platforms are really complex and you have to know a bunch of stuff about option trading to make sense of it. I want to be able to say, I think Apple's going to go up 20%. I think it's going to happen over the next 4 months. Show me some options that I could buy that fit that criteria. And I want to ask it in English, and I want it to have, show me 3 option trades. If I click on one, I can trade it. That is not fantasy far off. That is in the next year, and that's exciting. That's new and different stuff.
That's interesting. So if I was to play this back to you, like the way I sort of internalize this is if we have, let's say, a Venn diagram, like if the full circle is the world of questions and interactions that you would have with X being a company, be it bot or person, we are today at a small sliver that chatbots can take on, but really as time goes through, that sliver is just going to continue to grow with deeper and more meaningful sort of questions and insights, that the element of where we satisfy the customer's curiosity would be, I think, more convenient or more in sight to sort of achieve. But then that also really puts the human touch in an interesting, paradigm, whether it's needed or not. I mean, I think, dare I say, I think default is it's still needed, but now the merit is on its quality, and I think that's fascinating to hear.
And the quality of research that a brokerage firm provides will still need to be great. It's simply how do I get the answer to my question? Do I have to read the whole research report or 10 whole research reports? Or can I just ask the question? The AI reads the research reports and gives me the answer that I looked for. That's the essence of it. So the broker still needs the clay to mold in terms of the data, the information, the analytics, the analysis. But my ability to get it out is going to get a whole lot easier. And again, easier for unsophisticated traders and investors, which are, I keep making my chart of growth. That's what's happening in the world we live in. There are so many more people trading and investing that used to be on their own that, retail has become a much more important part of the market.
Yeah, it comes down to just making the market more accessible to folks, and it's just not even within the boundaries. Like you said, the boundaries of the borders, it's now cross-border.
And you want to give them tools so they don't blow their money. Because that's what we saw in the options world in particular. People blew money because they didn't know what they didn't know, and they made dumb trades. And the pros or the smarter retail firms take advantage of that. The retail
That's
investors.
incredible. I really appreciate you taking the time, Davis. I think this has been fascinating. I mean, today we've heard how, you went from your electronic trading pioneer to this AI support operator, translating technology into retention, happier clients, and I wish you great success because I think this is very exciting. For the audience, folks, once again, Davis. Davis, really, really thank you. We've covered a lot. We covered, quick wins on Ask Clio, the compliance trust, and how important that is. We also get to hear a little bit of Davis's insights when it comes to the founder's playbook for hiring, especially hiring when it comes to the three things: of skill, knowledge, and personability. So really, I appreciate you taking the time. That brings us to the end of this episode. This podcast is sponsored by Algo AI Partners. We help fintech services companies and businesses scale using smart AI solutions. If you want to book a free consultation to find out more, click the link in the description below. Thank you, Davis. I appreciate you.
It was a pleasure. Enjoyed it.
Amazing.